that a longing heart makes? What's the sound when it breaks? What's the sound that a longing heart makes? Oh, that's the sound. Oh, can you hear it? Or is it too loud? Rolling like a ship, twisting in a storm like an iceberg ripping through the hull of the ball. Oh, no, no. Can you hear me now? Or am I too loud? Don't tie me down. I can finally let it out. Oh no, now it's starting to show, and I just can't escape it anymore. What's the sound that it makes? What's the sound when it breaks? What's the sound that a longing heart makes? Oh, that's the sound. What's the sound that a longing heart makes? What's the sound when it breaks? What's the sound that a longing heart makes? Oh, that's the sound. That's the sound. I got kicked on the head, I got smacked in the brain, I got snow on my nose. But I always try to wake up smiling. I got drilled in the arm and I burned on the farm and I lost all my clothes. But I always try to wake up smiling. When I was a younger man, I had time on my side. My God, you know the things we planned, they made me realize. I got kicked on the head, I got smacked in the brain, I got snow on my nose. But I always try to wake up smiling. I got drilled in the arm and I burned on the farm and I lost all my clothes. But I always try to wake up smiling. And now I'm an older man, I got a dimmer on my brain. My God, you know the things we planned, I couldn't drag them around again. I got kicked on the head, I got smacked in the brain, I got snow on my nose. But I always try to wake up smiling. I got drilled in the arm and I burned on the farm and I lost all my clothes. But I always try to wake up smiling. I don't wanna live no more. I've been knocked off my feet. I'm standing at death's door with my back turned to the street. If I had been a younger man, you know I could stand the pain. My God, you know the things we're playing. I just can't drag them around. Oh, let me be your refugee. Jesus, please let me be your looking far ahead. We're out for just long enough to pay off debt, but it hasn't happened yet. Our buddies go, it's the story we all know. Our buddies go, our buddies go, talk back as the cold. There's money in the air, the cracks in the street. The devil's out on the town. He'll buy us a drink and fill our cup. We're pouring his love from the ground. Our brothers go, it's the story we all know. Our brothers go, our brothers go, drop back as the cold.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Breaking the Silence webinar series. My name is Candace Fair, and I am the Community Enhancement and Development Officer with CASA Foundation. We are the fundraising arm of CASA Child, Adolescent, and Family Mental Health. We raise money to support CASA services and raise awareness about children's mental health. We are honored to be partners with the Mental Health Foundation and to bring to you Breaking the Silence. Both organizations are passionate about mental health care and are grateful that the Breaking the Silence team has brought us together to share resources and to support everyone involved. We are so happy you are able to join us today. It is important more than ever to recognize and show our respect to the Indigenous people of our country through a treaty acknowledgement, which is an act of reconciliation to recognize traditional territory of the Indigenous people who were the first to call this land home. Today, we acknowledge that we are on sacred Treaty 6 land, the ancestral land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux, and we recommit to our promise to live together on this land and take care of one another in these difficult times and always. So this evening, resilience through connecting, caring, and coping. Our virtual session has just one note, and it's a housekeeping note. We just want to remind everybody that we are recording this evening's session, so that will be available to participants afterwards, and also available on the Breaking the Silence website for a limited time. Resilience is the ability to weather through adversity and bounce back from setbacks, also to grow through challenges. In this interactive session, caregivers and professionals will explore ways that we can increase our own resilience by connecting with supportive people and communities, also by caring for ourselves through self-care and self-compassion, and engaging in coping practices that carry us through difficult moments and help us to thrive. Our presenters today are Kathy Mercier and Renata Logan from the Children, Youth, and Family Education team at Alberta Health Services. Renata Logan is a registered psychologist who has been serving individuals, couples, and families of the Edmonton area for the past several years. She has a master's in science in marital and family therapy and bases much of her work in a holistic frame, believing that the source for healing or lasting change is rooted in the mind, body, spirit triad, as well as the family community connection. Her intention as a clinical educator and psychotherapist is to assist persons of all ages and histories in finding a pathway towards improved daily life contentment and well-being. Our second presenter this evening, Kathy Mercier, is an educator with children, youth, and families, addiction, and mental health. To this team, Kathy brings experience in working in a variety of social services roles in community agencies that support children youth, adults, and families, specifically in the areas of mental health, addictions, homelessness, poverty, child protection, and trauma. We welcome you both, Kathy and Renata, and thank you so much for being with us here this evening.
Thank you, Candace, for such a lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you join us for this evening's session on resilience through connecting, caring, and coping. And we feel honored to be part of a very special two-day event. This session specifically was brought to you in partnership between the Mental Health Foundation and Alberta Health Services. And as Candace mentioned, my name is Renata. I'm a mental health educator with the Children, Youth, and Families Addiction and Mental Health team within Alberta Health Services. And I'm also a registered psychologist who's been working in the Edmonton community for the past 18 years. And my co-host, Kathy, will be presenting the second half of tonight's material, but supporting our process all throughout. Kathy, you had a few words for our group this evening.
I just want to say hello. I'm excited to be here. And I'm also part of this team. And this is such a great topic for you to be a part of with us tonight. We're looking forward to your involvement as we go. And I will be joining you for the second half. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kathy. So just a little reminder that today's information or the information supplied in today's presentation does come from a variety of evidence or research-based sources, as well as from the professional experience of our team. And our team includes some nurses, occupational therapists, psychologists, teachers, counselors, and social workers. Now, although we hope to provide you with some rich material, this is meant to be supplemental to the care provided to you by a therapist, doctor, or other healthcare professional. It should therefore not be used in place of medical advice, instruction, and/or formal treatment. So if you have any specific questions or concerns, please contact a mental health therapist, doctor, or healthcare professional working within your midst. Also, to help keep everyone awake and engaged at this later hour, there will be opportunities for you to participate in some interactive discussion. And we're going to do that using the chat feature in Zoom. Now, most of us are quite familiar with where this is located, but just as a brief reminder, you can open the chat forum by clicking the chat icon at the bottom of your page. It'll either, it'll come up as either a pop-up window or just to the side of your screen. And once it's open, you have the single option of directing your chats to panelists, which is Kathy and myself. So your chats will only be seen by Kathy and I, and your identity will not be shared with the group. Now, please, folks, refrain from using the chat feature for just general chat. We really just want to reserve this for our interactive discussions tonight. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to send to us, if there is time towards the end, we'll make some space to look at those. So just reserve some of those comments and questions towards the end if there's some time. Okay, so what are we hoping to look at tonight? Well, first of all, we're going to just do a review as to the type of stress we're experiencing in our lives and maybe have a new way of looking at stress. We're also going to look at what we know and understand about resilience. And then more specifically, how can we increase our resilience by strengthening our supportive connections, increasing our self-care and our self-compassion, as well as learning to practice some positive coping strategies. Okay, before we look at ways to strengthen our resilience in the face of stress, we first need to have a little chat about what stress is, just for a moment. Now, a simple definition of stress is that it's our body's response to change. That change could be immediate, it could be upcoming, or it could just be a perceived change. And so stress is kind of what activates our whole body, in that our stress response impacts our body's emotional, psychological, cognitive, and physical systems. So there's a lot involved in how our body mobilizes and responds to the change that we experience. Now we're going to start off with a quick poll just to get things going here. Stress, I'm going to pop this up. The question is, oops, we'll just back up here a little bit. This is the question, everyone. Is stress bad for our mental and physical health? We're going to launch that. What do you think? Is it bad for our physical and mental health? We hear a lot about the impacts of stress in various ways, and certainly that it can affect us mentally and physically. But is it really bad overall for our mental and physical health? So all the answers are coming in pretty fast and furious here. We'll just maybe give a few more seconds for the rest to respond. And then we're just going to close the poll here. So, it looks like the majority of you were leaning towards false. About 80% of you responded that, no, stress isn't all bad. Whereas some of you thought, well, true, yeah, we hear so much, but 20% of you thought, we know that stress is bad. We just hear this all the time. So what is the actual truth? Well, from the way we're going to look at stress tonight, the answer is in fact false, because experiencing stress and how to use it is actually an important part of being physically and mentally healthy. And when we look at it this way, we just need to reframe our thinking about stress. Because in fact, there is some positive forms of stress that help us to advance in our world. So stress is a normal and unavoidable part of everyday life. When we're faced with a threat, a challenge, a problem, or any new experience, our sympathetic nervous system is going to kick into high gear, and it's going to get us energized, motivated, and focused. And so the right amount of stress helps us to actually perform at our best, take on new challenges, solve problems, learn skills, and build overall resiliency. Now, of course, when we get too much stress or a certain type of stress, and when we could get overloaded and overwhelmed, and then our ability to perform and figure things out and generally do well just goes down, okay? It decreases. So that's where stress could have an impact. So now let's take a moment to reflect on what stresses we've been facing lately, right? And just maybe in the past year. And this will be our first opportunity to come together and just share our responses anonymously. And you're going to do so via the chat function. So go ahead, everyone. What have been some of the stresses that you've been facing or have been most prominent for you lately? Let's just have a little group think and share as to what those have been. Hey, I know for me right now, I'm feeling the stress of just being inside, the air quality being a little bit harder right now across our province. So that's been something true for what I've experienced. It looks pretty quiet out there. I'm gonna maybe just check in with Candace. Do we have the option?
I do not see any questions in the chat at this time.
Yeah, no responses coming in. And we do have participants. Okay, everyone might just be a little bit quiet tonight. Okay, Kathy. So my parenting. One of you shared, yes, parenting. Probably one of the hardest jobs, if not the hardest job on the planet, right? There's no right manual written on it. So we're constantly being challenged by parenting. And of course, COVID, right? We're gonna chat a little bit about COVID later, but that was a big curve that none of us was really expecting on how to work with the pandemic. Really, that's been a new experience for most of us and the entire world altogether. One of you, yes, COVID-19 and the multitude of negative impacts. Yes, thank you for sharing. One of you had mentioned lack of sleep, right? If sleep is hard to come by, then it's going to be that much harder to just manage the day. So certainly the quality and the quantity of sleep that we need could be a big source of how well we do and manage stress. One of you mentioned, Karen, for elderly parents, right? Especially if you're, part of a sandwich generation caring for kids as well as elderly parents. That's a lot to take on all at once. And then add on a job that you might be having to do. So many different roles and hats that many of us are having to carry right now. And each of them seems to demand so much of our time and energy. One of you shared relationships and managing being together in the same space during COVID. Yes, we've been having to learn to adapt in a whole big way on how we do much of our relating and sharing of space and kind of a sharing of experience too. We've all been adjusting and coping in our own way and having to do so in very close proximity. And perhaps that's never something we had to do before. One of you mentioned having to do online teaching, having to move really rapidly into this whole new format or sphere of doing something that you felt really competent in doing before. And just the whole reality of doing online teaching, such as we're doing tonight, right? We're having to engage in discussions a little bit differently and read body language differently and even manage delays in time. So our brains and our nervous systems are being challenged in a real big way just by how we are interacting through the interface. Okay, wonderful responses, everyone. We're going to move on, but I know we could probably chat and share all night and would do well by sharing a little bit of what we've been experiencing. Okay, so it is clear that our lives are full of stressors, from small everyday stressors to those larger, kind of bigger life stressors. And we feel these stressors as individuals, we feel them in our families, and we sometimes feel them as a community or with COVID on a global level. Now, of course, as many of you mentioned, we felt this personal and global stress of COVID for about 18 months now, at least. And we've been, in a way, carrying on a whole new kind of stressor. A pandemic has brought us into new awarenesses, lots of change we never have experienced before, and stress like we've never seen before. It has been a universal everyday stressor that has affected each of us through kind of the necessary implementation of those COVID protocols and on the kind of restrictions in our homes, our schools, our workplaces, and our businesses, and all of this kind of ever changing. And we're having to regularly update ourselves on all these protocols. And for many, this has led to some significant life stress, as well as even some traumatic events, such as financial strain, job loss, illness, long-term disability, and of course, sadly, death. So COVID-19 has made some pretty tough situations even tougher for so many. And then on top of that, the ongoing or chronic nature of this pandemic, as well as the constant adaptation of guidelines as new information is gained, has just worn us down, right? We're feeling its effect now, and we might feel it for years to come, okay? Now, any stressors like this that are ongoing and that prolong the activation of our stress response system in the absence of a protective relationship or any sort of resources is called toxic stress. So we're going to watch a video that discusses this.
Research has proven that positive experiences in our earliest years actually help build brain architecture. So does that mean negative experiences can weaken brain architecture? The answer is yes, and the culprit is certain kinds of stress. The body and brain respond to stress by raising the heartbeat, pumping out adrenaline, and sending out stress hormones like cortisol, preparing us to act in a crisis. One kind of stress, called positive stress, is beneficial. It's normal and healthy for children to face challenges like meeting new people or attending the first day of school. The stress responses triggered by these events are usually short and not too severe. This kind of stress is positive because it prepares the brain and body for stressful situations later in life.
There are kind of these multiple phases of stress. So we have kind of what we call good stress, which is this kind of controllable stress in our lives, things like studying for a test, solving a problem. At the time, we may not like them, but the reality of it is that we grow from them, we develop adaptive coping skills, and they kind of benefit us in the long run.
Children surrounded by caring adults experience positive stress in ways that benefit and strengthen their brain architecture. It's how we prepare our brains and bodies for other stressful events that we will experience throughout life. Sometimes children face more serious events. Think of a bad accident or a tragedy like a death in the family or a natural disaster. These events can cause a more severe stress response with the potential to last a long time and come back often. Support from caregivers can buffer the severity of the stress response and help keep stress levels under control. If the stress is kept in check, it won't do lasting damage to the child's brain and body. That's called tolerable stress.
And so this is things that are bad, but they're the kind of things we can't avoid, like the death of our parents or moving away from home, things that everyone goes through. And they're not positive. They're kind of negative in value, but they're the kind of things that everyone goes through. We can all kind of support each other, and they're made a lot easier by support networks and, coping skills and stuff like that.
The attention and support of caregivers prevents tolerable stress from causing lasting harm to developing brains. A third kind of stress is called toxic stress. It occurs during repeated exposure to bad situations like abuse, neglect, or serious hardship. If no supportive adults are around to help buffer the stress response, the hormone levels stay dangerously high. Severe stress is especially toxic if it occurs often and lingers for a long time. That can have a negative impact on brain architecture and on other systems in the body. Toxic stress can cause serious health problems later in life.
These are things that are like pervasive, typically very uncontrollable and unpredictable, abusive relationships, poverty, loss of job, loss of social status, things like this, which are kind of beyond our control and are very pervasive in our life and really kind of have this detrimental effect on us.
Toxic stress can weaken developing brain architecture and damage other body systems in young children. The effects can be a lifetime of health challenges, including physical and mental health problems, and even addiction. To ensure a healthier future for our families and communities, we need to work together to support caregivers and children, prevent toxic stress, and provide the kinds of nurturing experiences that build healthy brains and bodies.
So if you like this video, the albertafamilywellness.org actually has quite a few different videos that they rigged up on various related topics. So really worth checking out, and we'll be supplying that in our resources that we'll be delivering to you a little bit later. Okay, so moving on. We're going to take a little look at the many signs of stress that we can see or experience in our physical bodies, as well as in our emotions and thinking and in our behaviors. And again, why to do this? Well, just to build a little bit of awareness as to how we might be experiencing that stress or our loved ones. So really quick discussion, everyone. Let's just put it out there. How are we feeling that stress in our bodies? And again, sharing via the chat. Where does stress show up for you? And again, all your responses are anonymous. So it's just going to be kind of a group think and sharing where we're holding some of our extra weight or the pain that we're experiencing or the stress. Okay, I know, where does it come up for me? I'm going to advance this so that Kathy can do some, shoulders for one of you. Yeah, Kathy put that, but I was wiggling my shoulders, I think lately, neck and shoulders for sure. My jaw, I carry a lot of stress and tension in my jaw. For some of us, there could be in the stomach, appetite and weight or eating could be impacted. We could experience some weight changes, but stomach upset is pretty big thing. Let's see what some of you wrote. Yeah, so gut health, not feeling hungry or having a lot of nervous energy. Neck aches, headaches, shoulder aches. Yes, we carry a lot of weight on our shoulders, quite literally. It's quite incredible how a lot of the strain we feel is in that shoulder and neck area. It's like our heads are working so hard, we're having to hold them up. Some of us might be experiencing more chest pain or tension in our chest, or even shallowed breathing, sweaty palms, or just general kind of shaky sweatiness. Lower energy or fatigue is a common complaint, either sleeping too much. And one of you put sleeping too much to escape reality, right? So just kind of feeling like, not feeling like I really am excited to get out of bed today, so I'm just going to sleep extra. One of you shared insomnia, right? Whether it's difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, so definitely some sleep disturbances. Lower energy, general fatigue, even higher blood pressure or a higher resting heart rate. There's lots of studies to show that young kids who are quite stressed have a remarkably higher resting heart rate until that that chronic stress or toxic stress is lowered, and then their heart rates go down. So it's quite incredible how our bodies manage to sort of work through all this stress. Thank you for sharing, everyone. We're going to move on. So now really quickly, where do we experience stress in our thoughts and in our emotion? How might stress pop up for you in your thoughts or in your emotion? I know for me, it could be the sense this is just too much. I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I want to handle it. So those are maybe some of the thoughts I could have, or the what ifs, those big what if thoughts come racing in, and kind of we can ruminate about the what ifs or the worst case scenarios. So what's happening for all of you? Just to share in the chat function, how are your thoughts? Or even just how you're thinking. Maybe are you noticing that you're just kind of more forgetful or have sort of a foggy brain? You know, that's how stress could really impact us sometimes. I'm going to see what here. A lot of internal negative chatter. Yes, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's just kind of a lot. It seems that with more stress and we're feeling overwhelmed, we start to doubt ourselves, right? We underestimate what we're capable of doing, as well as overestimate how bad it's going to be. So our negative self-talk, when you said foggy brain for sure, and then lacking confidence, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? If we're just not feeling quite on top of our game or really far from it, we're just going to start to doubt ourselves more. We're not going to have that confidence. We're not going to feel solid on our feet. Glass half empty syndrome. Yes, we have kind of more of a pessimistic or pessimism set in, that we're just kind of not banking on it going very well. And it's probably going to be more glass half empty. So great responses, everyone. Some in terms of emotion, many of us might have been experiencing higher forms of anxiety, or just kind of expanded anxiety or generalized anxiety, or more loneliness, more kind of a depression in mood and energy and overall outlook. A lot of people have been experiencing feelings of guilt and even shame, as it relates to even pandemic, right? There hasn't been a lot of clarity as to how we should best manage ourselves, and there hasn't been as much agreement. And so we might have been feeling angry about that, confused, and then of course, feeling guilty and shame to not know quite how we're supposed to manage ourselves well. So that's been a big thing this year. All right, great responses, everyone. Thank you again for sharing. We're gonna move forward. And then finally, really quickly, how might stress impact how we show up? Like, how is it that we're behaving, right? If we were to kind of watch ourselves through a film or a video camera, what would we see when we're stressed? Well, for me, when I'm stressed, I might be a bit more agitated. I might be flitting about, kind of with the foggy brain, racing, trying to do things and not really getting anywhere, it seems. So, for some of you, again, sleep problems were mentioned. There could be a difference in your eating, right? Eating less or eating more. Just a general restlessness or that agitation like I spoke of. You could notice that you're more argumentative, just more irritable, argumentative, or you might be a little bit more prone to want to cry, right? More of the tears are flowing. You're just needing to release a lot of pent up emotion. Some of us might be using, reaching for more substances to kind of escape or numb out a bit, such as nicotine or even caffeine or alcohol, right? Caffeine to stimulate ourselves, caffeine to stimulate ourselves, alcohol to sort of numb things out. We might be misusing some medication and even looking to some illicit drugs. Our hygiene might be going down. We might just not be caring for ourselves in the same way. And a big one overall that many of you might have noticed is avoidance. And Kathy put that up there, avoidance. You know, this makes sense. Whenever we're feeling in pain, whether emotionally or physically, we're going to do whatever we can to avoid that. That's just instinctual. But as we're going to learn, the more we avoid, the more stressed we actually get. Okay, so we want to not avoid and find a gentler way to lean into these stressors. So just as we're wrapping up this piece, we want to note that in these behaviors, we're of course trying to find ways to cope with the stress. And of course, many of these may seem to help in the short term, but they may actually, like I mentioned, increase our stress over the time. So again, we need to attack the avoidance. We can't escape always because it's actually not serving to reduce that stress in the long run. Now, when we experience too much overwhelming and unresolved stress over a long period of time, this of course can lead to burnout and some form of illness, right? So many of you might have heard terms like adrenal fatigue or just this idea of burnout. And so literally our bodies are kind of getting burnt out. And when we're burnt out, our emotions can be blunted, or we may be having feelings of hopelessness. We may be feeling exhausted all the time, or we might start to become jaded and cynical. And we notice a change in our productivity. We're just not as productive or as efficient. And so when we are burnt out, it can be really, as you imagine, difficult to bounce back and bounce back to a place where we feel like ourselves again, or that we feel like we're ever going to get back to where ourselves, how we could perform before. And yet, we've said all this, it can be done. There is a way to bounce back, even if burnout has happened. Maybe not in one day, but through some regular practices that help us to care for ourselves, cope through those stressful events, and connect with some supportive communities. You know, we're gonna be able to build that resilience muscle. So when life knocks us down, there are things that we can do to more than just survive. We can actually thrive. And that's the power of this resiliency muscle. So resiliency is the ability to use one's internal strengths as well as your external resources to recover and even learn and grow from life's challenges and obstacles. So Dr. Rick Hansen, he's kind of an expert in this area. Let's see what he has to say about resilience.
Resilience is the capacity inside us to both survive the worst day of our life and thrive every day of our life. So it's not just for combat or trauma or growing up in great poverty. It's for dealing with everyday stresses so that as life challenges us, we are not swamped by it. It's a little bit like a sailboat with a keel. So the challenges come, the waves come, the weather changes, the storms arrive. And yeah, they affect you, but they don't sink you. And if they bang on you hard, you recover quickly. That's what resilience fundamentally is. It's the capacity to stay, to maintain an equilibrium, to be regulated internally in the pursuit of important goals while being challenged.
I like his metaphor on that, with the boat amongst the waves. So as he mentioned, this ability is really to stay regulated while we are being challenged. And it isn't just for people with certain character traits or skill or finances or special circumstances. Resilience is a quality that we can all develop and strengthen. No matter what our circumstances are, there are things we can do that really increase or strengthen the resilience in ourselves as well as in our families and communities. Now, although your brain is not a muscle per se, it still gets stronger and grows in the areas that you give attention, time, and effort to. So the more that you're kind of building those particular ways of being, thinking, and acting, that's literally you're building that brain architecture for resilience. Now, this is because of neuroplasticity. Some of you may have heard this term. Though our brain is fairly mature or fully developed by the time we are age 25 or 30, it's still always changing and adapting to our experiences in our environment. So it has plasticity. It has the ability to change. And so that old adage of old dogs cannot learn new tricks, well, that's not true, because no matter how old we get, we can still learn some new tricks. So our brain has some capacity to change in how its neurons get fired and how those neural pathways get reinforced. So if we start engaging in practices that support our body's wellness, and if we start shifting our focus and attention to more positive perspectives, and if we surround ourselves with really helpful supports, we can actually change our brains in ways that allow us to become more positive and to see options and to learn and adapt and grow. And this is even possible for people who have experienced trauma. Okay, research suggests that between 30 to 70% of individuals who've experienced some form of trauma also report this experience of post-traumatic growth. And so this is a type of positive change or growth on the other side of the traumatic experience. And so it's important to note that this growth is not because of the traumatic experience, but because of the caring strategies and the supports that people had access to or made themselves have access to. They reached for these things, okay? We know that we recover a lot more from trauma the sooner that we have community and supportive relationship around us or other to share some of the load. And this is essentially going to be our focus for the remainder of today's session. How we can strengthen our resilience through how we connect. So looking specifically at the ways we can identify and enhance our supportive relationships and our personal network of support, as well as how we care. And we're going to reflect more specifically on self-care, as well as this idea of self-compassion. Oh, sorry about that, everyone. I forgot to turn off my phone. I'll do that on the next break. And coping. How are we coping? Strategies that we can access to help us cope and work through this stress. So let's begin with the importance of connecting with others, because that really is the big one. That's the thing that's going to dictate a lot of things. Stress, as we know, can make us feel alone and under-equipped. It can make us forget that we have options, that we have other pathways that we can follow, and that we have meaningful support. And that's why resilient people have a lot of supportive relationship. And these relationships help them to feel accepted, understood, and validated. Right. So we know that resilient people who are doing really well, it's because they're networked. They have people. They're not doing this alone. And resilient people also engage with and encourage supportive communities. Okay. These communities that really are providing access to much needed resources, and they help us to feel a part of our larger world. So anyone who's resilient is part of a greater community, and we're all working together. So just with that, did you know that the single most common factor in developing resilience for children, what might it be? Well, it's actually the presence of at least one stable and committed relationship with an adult. So that could be a supportive parent, caregiver, or some other adult. And it's this stable relationship that's the number one factor for children to develop resilience. And we know this about children. And I think if I were to go to my stats, it's much the same for us as adults. We need at least one stable, supportive relationship to help us move forward, but we can't just rely on the singular one as adults. We need a bit more of a community. But for a child to start, just that one stable relationship. So we're going to hear more about this from another resilience expert, Dr. Robert Brooks.
It's fascinating to learn that when you ask adults who have truly overcome adversity, what did they think was one of the most important things in their childhood or adolescence to help them to be resilient, to cope more effectively, the first answer is that there was at least one person who truly believed in them and stood by them. And a wonderful psychologist, Dr. Julia Siegel, called that person a charismatic adult in a child's life. And he defined charismatic adult as an adult from whom a child or adolescent gathers strength. And what I always say to parents, think about who are the charismatic adults in your life. What did they say or do that you gathered strength from them? And are you saying or doing some of the same things for your children? Because every child, even every adult, needs people from whom they gather support, because that is the strength that they can build upon to be resilient.
Couldn't have said it better. So now I'm going to invite you to actually think of a supportive or caring adult who had a really positive effect on you when you were growing up. And to reflect on, what did this person do? What did they do specifically, or what was it about them that made a difference in your life? And again, we're going to share our answers via the chat. So we're moving more into a positive sort of discussion, one with possibility. And we're beginning with our early influences. What did this special person do that really made a difference for you in your life? Okay. What was it about them that really helped? Okay, let's see here. My grandparents, one of you shared, was they were very protective and loving and accepting. So a real sense of love and acceptance from grandparents. Another one of you shared that they really listened to me. Okay, they asked my opinions. Trying to think of, I have to admit, I didn't take a chance to think of whenever I'm trying to multitask here, which is not a possible thing. One of you shared, I just knew that I could go to them. Yeah, there was just something about them that felt really safe, very certainly approachable, maybe familiar, but they were part of your pack, your tribe, your people. You knew you could go to them. Or even if they were unfamiliar to you at first, there was something about them, even from the outset, that you knew they were safe and someone you wanted to spend more time with. Another one of you shared that they really listened specifically with no judgment. Another one of you shared that it was your friend's mom, that she was easy to talk to. So beyond your friend, it was her mother. So it's kind of, again, those other adults in the neighborhood or the community. And that she was just easy to talk to. Maybe sometimes it's easier for some kids to talk to other close adults than their parents directly, and that's okay. One of you shared that they encouraged mistakes or to even fail. I think that's brilliant because, if we're not kind of is supported to explore and know that it's okay to make mistakes and know that it's not possible to be perfect right from the outset, nor do you want to, because part of learning is in a way by trying and in a way failing. So we learn by doing, and we must be okay to make mistakes. And that sort of coaching from our loved ones is, so key. And then one of you shared that they challenged me. So these are beautiful responses. If we had more time, we could go on, but I invite you even later this week to reflect on who were those special people, or even just that one person that really made a difference for you. And what was it about them that made the difference? Because they carry a key ingredient that we might want to carry forth ourselves, or perhaps already do. So it's great to reflect, of course, on the people who were there for us as we were growing up. And even when we are adults, these types of supportive relationships continue to encourage us, shape us, and even if they're no longer present, right? When we're just thinking back to them, and their memory is something that we carry on through our daily lives and just what impact they left. So in the video, Dr. Brooks said that children and adults need people for whom they gather support. And with that, we want you to now think about who is supporting you now, and who in your life is giving you strength, helping you when you really need it, or encouraging you in your goals. Now, we're not going to share this via chat, okay, but just to kind of be aware now, who are your people, or who is your person right now? Some of your wing people or your right-hand people that are helping you out. And then in our follow-up resources, you're going to receive this tree of support worksheet. And this is where you can reflect further on these relationships. And just as a quick breakdown, in this activity, you're going to write down the names of people who are in your supportive network, and specifically the names of the people you are closest to, or that you feel you can depend on the most, such as your family or close friends. These would be written within the roots of your tree. And then other supportive people, such as health professionals, co-workers, community connections, any acquaintances even. These can be recorded in the leaves of your tree. And as you reflect, you can also add the names of people you may want to have within your tree. Even if there's not a close connection here, there yet, it's one that you're hoping to build within the future. So we're going to go through this really quickly. We might have to skip past just for sake of time, but we were going to lead you through to just even share who some of these people were. And Kathy was just going to annotate and share. So your roots people, again, are the ones that are closest to you, right? They're part of the roots that feed us and nourish us. And then the other ones that branch out and reach into the sky are ones of our kind of greater network of support. Okay, so it's just a really lovely exercise to try out. And kids love this too, by the way. So you can even have them start to draw out their tree of support. So needless to say, resilience grows in a community of interdependence. And we don't have to wait for a pandemic or for a crisis to start reaching out for help or offering support to others. So as we look at our needs and our own capacity for growth, we really can take those steps to add more supportive relationship and friendships into our personal network. Now, of course, it has been said that to have a good friend, you really need to be a good friend. And this is where emotional validation becomes key. So quick review of emotional validation, although this is a big topic in and of itself. One way that we can be better friends is through validating the emotions of others. And this involves really kind of understanding and showing our acceptance for another person's feelings. So we communicate this by, first of all, being super present, okay? We're dialing in and tuning in to what it is that they are sensing and feeling, right? We're showing that they have our attention and we truly are just tuning into their experience. Now, this also means being an active listener, right? Where we're showing that we're really paying attention through our verbal cues and our body language. And that we also want to name or acknowledge the person's feelings, right? We're not going to name it for them, particularly if they're there, but just acknowledge that we picking up on an emotion there, and then they're going to help us to fill in the blanks, right? And this is, of course, doing all this shows our empathy. So rather than jump straight to advice giving or problem solving, which is rarely helpful in moments where others simply need our care and compassion, we're going to move in with emotional validation first, right? Connection before anything else. So this is a quick little video by Brene Brown, who's a sociologist, and she speaks a lot about the power of empathy. And yeah, let's just see what she has to say.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I can't tell you how many times I have watched that video. Just is so present, so beautiful and true. I'm always getting something from it. I never grow tired of it. So if you enjoyed it, we'll be sharing that with you via our resources. So just a few more tips for building relationship, as if we need these tips, but sometimes, common sense isn't commonly applied. So it's good to have some gentle reminders. In building new relationship and, with pandemic, it's been hard. So maybe this is going to be helpful, but we have to be intentional. Okay. We have to be specifically consciously directed in trying to connect with people. Okay. And we can do this through volunteering or by joining groups that reflect our interests, our values, our faith, and so forth. And we're even through the pandemic, adapting and finding creative ways to do this when we were having to remain socially distanced. So connecting, right? And being intentional in connecting. And then when you meet new people that you might want to get to know better, you got to make the first move, right? We can't always wait for them to initiate, right? Just go ahead, make the first move, ask them questions, show your curiosity, maybe offer them some help or assistance, invite them for coffee, anything to welcome them into your sandbox. And then be open to those new perspectives, right? When we were kids, we made more friends easily with other kids. And why was that? Well, because they were just kids, right? There were no expectations. But as adults, we enter into relationships with some pretty established ideas about life, health, relationship, politics, religion, everything. And so we have all these kind of ideas and even some baggage that's kind of getting in the way at times. So let's put our analytic selves to the side for a moment and just try to be open and non-judgmental and curious while we are trying to get to know others. And then finally, we've got to be willing to make the effort and an ongoing effort, okay? Friendships take our time, they take attention and effort in order to last, but in the end, it's well worth all of that. Now, besides building connection with family and friends, we strengthen our resilience when we know how to access needed professional and community resources. And this could include connecting with family doctors, mental health therapists, certain teachers, social workers, even financial advisors, community agencies, government programs, etc. There's a lot out there that actually is really helpful. So knowing when we need help and reaching out to these supports is really part of a resilient lifestyle. Again, we're wired for connection. We're not designed to do this alone. Nobody can. And so building resilience is through connecting. So our next resiliency focus is caring. And specifically, we're going to focus on two areas, which is self-care and self-compassion. And I think this is where Kathy now jumps in to really expand on this for us. So we're just going to give her a moment to pop up her screen and to switch over. And then I'm going to move into the background. Oops, maybe I did the switch over too quick. I'm sorry.
That's okay, I'm in now. That's all right.
I could continue. Sorry.
That is no problem. Just make sure I've got my, all my stuff.
I'll make it up to you with some extra caring afterwards.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, it's okay. I love talking about this. So we're going to talk about self-care. It's kind of our next resiliency focus. We're going to get connected. And now we're going to really look at how we can care for ourselves. So thanks so much, Renata. Self-care, again, we talk about it. It's a buzzword. It can be defined as that practice of taking an active role in protecting our own well-being and our own happiness, especially during times of stress. And so self-care is one of those concepts that we understand, we don't always give enough time to or enough attention to, but it is really essential for our own well-being and resilience. It's so important because, why is it important? Actually, here's my question to you. Why is self-care important? Put your thoughts into the chat really quickly. What do you think? Why is self-care important for us? Why should we be doing it? We saw earlier in the chat, some people saying, I have a hard time with it. So we know that it's not always easy, but why is it important when you think about it? I'll give you folks just a second to put some thoughts into the chat. Somebody put, it confirms our worth and our value. I love that. Absolutely. We're worth it. We're worth it to be taken care of. We've got lots going on, very busy lives. We need to take care of ourselves because we're worth it. Absolutely. A lot of times we think about care for other people, and we'll talk about that, but it does confirm our worth and our value. That's a big one there, right? Definitely, I just kind of add to that. It helps us to manage our stress when we take care of ourselves. It decreases depression. It helps us to feel balanced, feel more calm. It fills our buckets. I like that. Thanks for sharing that. Makes us better parents, makes us better partners. Absolutely. All of these things. It improves our immune system. It makes us a good role model to others. And if we have kids, it really shows, it gives a coaching example or models of how we should treat ourselves, right? Cognitive function. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, being present. It refocuses our energy. So again, I love this. We seem to know that self-care is something that's so valuable. So thanks for sharing those thoughts. I'm just going to erase those if you don't mind. Thanks, Renata. Something we know that we need to do, we know it's important, but it is often so much easier for us to care for other people than it is to care for ourselves. We often actually care for others at the expense of our own wellness. But if we want to give others our best, we need to ensure that we have the inner resources to do so. It's been said, you cannot pour from an empty pot. And self-care, it helps us to replenish our inner reserves so that we're able to give others and give ourselves the best of us and not just what's left of us. Why is this a challenge? What are the barriers to self-care? Why is this so hard sometimes? I want to hear some of the things that are keeping you from getting all of your self-care, taking care of yourself. Put your thoughts into the chat. What is taking up? Number one, it's always the number one answer, time. Time is the number one answer, always. Yes, we have so much going on. Taking time for ourselves is really, really hard. And it's the thing that gets cut, right? We give up on our sleep. We give up on eating well. We give up on tending to things internally and emotionally that we need to tend to. Somebody else put guilt. Yeah. We kind of are raised in a culture where you just got to stick it out, where we almost value being too busy. We value when people say, oh, I've got so much going on. And it's almost put on a pedestal, like people who are just overscheduled, over busy, and don't have time for themselves. It's almost like it's something we kind of reward. So yeah, and not enough energy. You know, it is true, to give ourselves care, we do actually have to put some energy into it. And if we are completely drained by others at the end of the day, then we have a hard time with that. So thank you. These are real barriers, and we have to somehow, some way address some of these barriers, because of course, the more time we can give to our self-care, the more energy we'll have, the more clarity we'll have, the better feelings we'll have. And again, here's somebody put, others have bigger needs, it seems sometimes, but you know what? We can't be there for them unless we are ourselves filled. Thanks so much for sharing these, guys. So these are also things we know. So how can we kind of overcome these things? Well, one of the things we can do to overcome some of this is to address some of those myths. You know, we think about having some feelings of guilt around self-care. Well, that's a barrier that's real, but we still need to have that self-care for us. We have to carve that time out in our day to have more energy. We have to put energy into self-care, even in small ways. And to do this, we might need to change some perspectives about self-care and tackle some of those myths. Maybe if we do that, we'll feel better about investing in it. So one myth, that self-care is selfish. It's not. It's not selfish. When we care for ourselves, we're more equipped to handle life's challenges and be a more productive and a more helpful member of our community and our families. And especially this, if you're in a role where you're responsible for the care of others, whether that's in your family, personally, or professionally, self-care actually becomes an ethical responsibility, because we find that if we don't take care of ourselves and if our needs are not met, then we put ourselves at risk of compromising our own healthy boundaries, or we start to become resentful towards those people that we care for and support. And we might even look to them to meet our needs and put burdens on them that are not theirs. So we need to really take care of ourselves for the sake of others. Second myth, self-care means stress-free. Some people balk at the idea of self-care because they say they've tried it and it didn't work, as if self-care is somehow supposed to remove all stress in our lives. But self-care isn't going to bring us a stress-free life. It's not going to bring that elusive balance that we always talk about. But self-care can help us to navigate life stressors more effectively, Or to use Dr. Rick Hansen's boat analogy, it kind of helps us stay upright and afloat, even when there's waves. Another myth, self-care means self-sufficient. So the World Health Organization says that self-care is the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health. So as we mentioned earlier, we need to be connected to others and engage with supportive communities and have access to needed services in order to thrive. So giving to and receiving from others is actually a part of self-care. So let's look at some of these different areas of care. There's a lot more than this, we can really break it down, but these are some big ones. Our lives have so many different facets, and we do want to try to be fulfilled in each area of our lives. And Dr. Rick Hansen again says that we all have the need for safety, satisfaction, and connection or inclusion. And as you look at each of these areas, can you see any area where maybe you're not satisfied? Maybe an area you don't feel safe or stable, or any area where you lack connection or don't feel valued, heard, or respected. So just take a look. I'm just going to ask you to look actually at each area and think. We're not going to have a discussion on this. We just want you to think to yourself, what's an area of your own life that may need more of your attention and care? Okay, keep that in mind. We really do want you to take some time this week to reflect on an area that probably needs more attention, an area where you might need to renew, refresh, reconnect, or recharge. So keep that in mind as we go through this session. So as you thought about that, how we care for ourselves in those areas can be very different depending on each day, depending on our needs and our energy and all of that. And the type of self-care that we need can change from day to day. Sometimes we need self-care that helps us to step back. So maybe we need to cancel some plans. Maybe we need to let some things go, book a restful vacation, or give ourselves some permission to rest and repair. Sometimes we need to fill up by doing things that nurture us, that fill us, walking in nature, eating healthy food, talking with a friend, getting creative. It's something that helps reconnect ourselves with who we are. Sometimes we need to kind of lift things off our shoulders. We might need to do the self-care of getting things done. Maybe we have to clean our house. We have to address a problem that's been taking energy away from us. We have to maybe make an appointment or tackle a project. These are types of self-care in that they help us to feel more in control of our lives. And sometimes we might go for the self-care that helps us zone out, watch a movie, eat junk food, have a drink or two, do a little shopping, do a little gambling, mindlessly surf the internet. This type of self-care allows for an occasional escape. And again, this is okay in moderation, right? We can all have those moments where we're just going to have that little treat. Having one bowl of ice cream is a nice treat. Eating a whole bucket of ice cream every day, that becomes harmful, right? So I really want you to think about if you're always turning to these zone out activities, these ones, and you're only going to these types of activities for self-care and not including some of the healthier practices in your routines, this actually might be a sign that we're not really doing well, that we don't have energy to kind of pour into some of the other type of self-care. And then we might need to attend to some coping skills, and we might need to attend to our basic needs. So that's the place to start. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you moving every day or exercising through the week? Are you eating healthy? No, we can all probably improve in one or more of these areas. And when it comes to self-care, these basic needs, they really are the place to start. We can't overemphasize that enough. If you know that you're lacking in one of these areas, please make a plan this week to change your schedule or change your routines to make it so that you can sleep a bit more or move a bit more or eat a little bit better, okay? And if you're having real challenges in any of these areas that are really impacting your health and your wellness, do talk to your doctor or another trusted healthcare professional because you want to get on top of these areas. They're so important for your general wellness and resiliency. So now we're going to move from self-care to self-compassion. We're often so quick to show understanding, care, and compassion to other people. If you had a friend who was hurting or upset, what would you do? What would you say to them? You would show great compassion. You would encourage them. You'd remind them of their strengths. You'd give them helpful and non-judgmental advice. But do you treat yourself the same way? When you're upset or when you're hurting, do you talk to yourself with the same language and the same feelings and care? Often when we experience setbacks or failures, or we make mistakes, or we experience hardship, we actually become angry and critical and judgmental or perfectionistic towards ourselves. We often hold ourselves to a standard that's unrealistic. It's a standard we don't hold other people to. But what if we didn't? What if instead, when you're going through a hard time, you spoke to yourself with the same compassion, showed the same grace, and the same non-judgmental encouragement that you give to other people? This is self-compassion, and it's a very powerful tool when we're building our resilience. Self-compassion has 3 components. The first one is mindfulness. So mindfulness is where we just kind of take a moment and notice what we're feeling, that we are having that hard time. We notice what we're feeling, but we do it without dismissing it, without exaggerating it, or without judging those feelings. We just accept them. I am having a hard time. Then we bring in common humanity. This is just where we remind ourselves that tough times are a part of being human, that you're not alone in having feelings like this. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. And then the last thing you bring into it is that self-kindness, where you respond to these acknowledgements with kindness towards yourself. You can get through this. It's going to be okay. So we're going to watch a video where we see someone actually go through a self-compassion exercise. Let's watch. Whoop. Let's see if I can get it going.
Step number 1, think of a situation in your life that is difficult and causing you stress. Okay. Number 2, call the situation to mind and see if you can actually feel the stress and emotional discomfort in your body. Yeah, I can definitely feel it in my neck and shoulders. I know that's where I carry a lot of my anxiety. Okay, step number 3, say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. This acknowledgement is a form of mindfulness, of simply noticing what's going on for you emotionally in the present moment without judging that experience as good or bad. You can say to yourself, this hurts or this is stress. Use whatever statement feels most natural to you. So, this sucks. How many more days left of this do I have? So just saying this is stress or this sucks, but that's okay. Those are statements that feel natural to me. Step 4, say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. This is a recognition of your common humanity with others, that all people have trying experiences, and these experiences give you something in common with the rest of humanity. Other options include other people feel this way, I'm not alone, or we all struggle in our lives. I think the I'm not alone statement really resonates with me. I think that a lot of other active duty military psychiatrists probably have somewhat of a similar sentiment. Just that knowledge that you're not alone really, really helps. Number 5, put your hands over your heart. Feel the warmth of your hands and the gentle touch of your chest and say,